Session 5: Political Obligation, Liberty and Justice. Introduction. Earlier on in this course, I have discussed with you the factors that enable those that control the state to command, that is, authority. In this study session, therefore, I want to discuss why the people obey. This is the concept of political obligation. When we are talking about the issues of individual and state security, there should be in existence some measure of freedom. The state has as one of its cardinal principles the protection of the liberty of her citizens. This study session discusses the issue of liberty in a socio-political setup. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to explain what political obligation is using at least 4 theories of obligation. Discuss the assumptions that underlie the concept of liberty, and describe what justice is. Political obligation. Political obligation is the direct opposite of authority. When I was discussing the concept of authority with you in study session 3, I said it is based on rules with the general consent of the people. It discussed why those in power have the right to command. Political obligation, in another sense, is about those conditions, factors, or forces which make people to obey the law. It explains why the people obey the government of the country. To appreciate this concept, we have to turn to some theories of political obligation, which will make the concept to be better understood. And some of the theories of political obligation that we are going to discuss include the following. 1. Prudent theory of obligation. This theory, which is otherwise known as the theory of enlightened self-interest, was introduced by Thomas Hobbes. His explanation was that people obey the law of the land out of prejudice or enlightened self-interest. This is because in societies, government exhibits the instrument of coercion with which they can visit law offenders. It is the fear of discomfort, pain, or harm which makes people to obey. In other words, people obey for fear of punishment. Weakness of the theory. That people obey because of fear cannot be regarded as the valid theory of obligation. Following this theory means that people obey out of coercion, but in obligation, there must be an element of voluntariness. People should obey the law voluntarily and not out of coercion. 2. The theory of consent. The idea behind this theory is that people live in societies which have evolved or emerged out of social contract. Social contract is another theory which states that people that occupy certain societies surrender part of their rights to the common good of the society. Thus, all who live in the society are either directly or indirectly parties to the social contract. That means that they are duty-bound to obey the law of that same society. Weakness of the theory. It is a big illusion to imagine that all within a society are party to a social contract, or that there is a social contract at all. The fact is that many states emerge artificially out of imposition of war or superior power. 3. Theory of the general will. This theory is propounded by Jeremy Bentham. This is the idea that all in the society have a common will or interest, which is the responsibility of those who govern to promote and protect in order to achieve the collective good of the society. And because of this responsibility vested in the government, it is important that all should obey the rules in order to facilitate the attainment of that end. This theory is similar to the theory of common good. Weakness of the theory. It is not in all society that the rulers articulate the interests of the society or does what is good for all. Many rulers are, for the most part, self-serving and often pursue their own interests, even if this means defying the common good or rights of an individual. 4. The theory of habits. Jeremy Bentham argues that men obey because of the habit of obedience. Political obligation derives from the gentle and persistent induction of individuals in the society into the moral values of that society. As individuals grow within the society, they internalize and manifest the basic morals and religious values which form the basis for a willingness to obey. Weakness of the theory. This theory, unfortunately, is about the mechanism of obedience rather than the reason for obedience. It describes how people acquire the will to obey government and not why they obey. Liberty. The concept of liberty is discussed on the basis of humans' nature of free will. It is believed that a normal human being has the capacity and right to choose and determine his or her own actions. In essence, liberty is often used interchangeably with freedom. Assumptions on the concept of liberty. 1. The first assumption of the term liberty is that man is free to choose his or her actions because he is capable of making choices that are beneficial to social existence. That means that man is rational to choose an action that is in the interest of all. 2. The second assumption is that freedom in a social context necessarily involves a certain level of limitation. This goes with the general saying, which says that where one's freedom ends, another person's freedom begins. Social freedom can be limited in two ways, and they are A. Freedom from, and B. Freedom to. Freedom from entails the absence of restraint to do what one wants to do, while freedom to pertains to actions which are restrained but which many political philosophers argue ought not to be restrained. Some activities that could be restrained include drug taking, homosexuality, incest, and prostitution. In every society, one cannot rule out the possibility of conflict of individual interests within that society. In such a context, absolute freedom is neither possible nor desirable. This is why laws exist to regulate individual relationships with the state and vice versa. An unlimited liberty of individuals therefore poses serious danger to social existence, as this can promote chaos in the society. Justice. If there is going to be need for relative freedom for an individual in the state, there must be justice. What justice entails is what this section wants to address. The definition of justice seems to be frequently given by philosophers of all ages with different meanings. Thrasymachus defines justice as the interest of the stronger, that is, an ability to do what one wants to do, irrespective of the objection or resistance of others. For anything to be just, the minimum requirement is that it does not involve any act which brings injustice to others. Justice entails the existence of a relationship, and it is not an attribute of the actions of a person alone. For an action to be just, it must be perceived to be so by all those who are linked in that relationship. It was for this reason that the existentialist definition of justice is unacceptable. Existentialists define a just action as that which is most enabling of the species as measured with the most advanced man. The problem here is that justice is regarded as an individual attribute, whereas it is a social web. The naturalist equally defines justice as an action or arrangement which is in harmony with nature. The problem with this definition is that the natural order involves cruelty and deprivation. Animals and plants need to consume other things in nature in order to survive. Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism principle equally calls for each individual to perform those actions which will do more good for more people than any other. That means only that which maximizes the amount of good and the numbers of people who benefit from it can be regarded as good, just, or desirable. The problem with the principle of utilitarianism, but justice should rather be defined in relation to actions or policies and their consequences. John Rawls, in his book, A Theory of Justice, said, "Justice is the foundation of social structure, that is, of all institutions and relationships." To him, justice operates essentially in the area of distribution of goods, that is, wealth, positions, opportunities, liberty, and self-respect. For a principle of justice to be beyond reproach, it must take note of certain human character or nature. He stated them as the following: 1. That every man has a good nature. 2. That whatever those goods may be, their attachment requires primary goals such as wealth, position, etc. 3. That the satisfaction or attainment of human goals depends on the possibility of engaging in social interactions. The problem with this explanation, however, is that this hypothetical route to getting an ideal principle of justice can only apply in a new society. But it is not possible for established societies to revert to the state of innocence, which is required for the attainment of this ideal. Study session summary. In this study session, we discussed that political obligation is concerned with the reason why people obey the law of the state. On the other hand, freedom is defined in terms of the positive attributes of self-realization rather than in terms of the absence of constraints. This is the argument of Plato. Liberty must therefore be identified with what is good or right, that is, with the performance of moral duties. The state, therefore, constitutes the most important barrier to the exercise of freedom. There are two variants of freedom: freedom to and freedom for. Freedom to and freedom from. We also noted that justice means different things to different people. End of study session 5. Thanks for listening.